Welcome to my show. All right, now, let me start with a question. How is it possible for a highly trained expert to look directly at something obvious and still fail to see it? Well, not because they are careless, not because they are inexperienced, not because the object is hidden, but because their attention is focused somewhere else. So, now, imagine this happening in medicine. A radiologist is looking through lung scans, searching for signs of cancer, and inside one of these scans, there is a gorilla. Yeah, a visible gorilla. And most of the experts do not report seeing it. That sounds impossible, but that is exactly what this research study we're going to talk about today investigated. So, hello everyone. My name is Adnan Satarayan and I am a psychology student at UNSW in Sydney. So, in this presentation, I'm going to explain a very fascinating empirical research study titled "The Invisible Gorilla Strikes Again: Sustained Inattentional Blindness in Expert Observer." This study was published in 2013 in Psychological Science, and the authors are Trafton Drew, Melissa L. Vu, and Jeremy M. Wolfe. So, over the next few minutes, I'm going to explain this study in a very clear and a structured way. So, I'll cover in this presentation the background of the topic, the problem the researchers wanted to investigate, the research question and hypotheses, the design of the study, the participants, the methodology and procedure, the results, the conclusion, and finally, the study's contribution to new knowledge.
Now, let's move on to the background.
So, to understand this study, we first need to understand the psychological idea behind it. So, the key concept is inattentional blindness. All right. So, inattentional blindness happens when a person fails to notice something visible because their attention is focused on another task. So, in simple terms, it means you can be looking right at something, but still not consciously notice it.
Wow.
And that sounds strange, but psychology has shown this repeatedly. And the most famous example is the original invisible gorilla experiment by Simons and Chabris in 1999. So, in that study, participants watched people passing a basketball and were asked to count the passes. While they were concentrating on that task, a person in a gorilla suit walked through the middle of the scene, and many participants never noticed the gorilla. And that classic finding challenged a very common assumption.
If something is visible, we will automatically see it.
But our minds do not work like a camera. The brain does not process everything equally. So instead, it filters information based on goals, expectation, and relevance.
So, what was the problem that researchers wanted to investigate?
The problem was that most earlier research on inattentional blindness had been carried out using non-experts in fairly artificial laboratory tasks. So those earlier studies were powerful, but they left an important question unanswered. And the question was, would the same attentional limitation appear in real experts doing meaningful work within their own field? Well, in other words, does professional expertise protect people from inattentional blindness?
What?
We don't know.
Well, now let's move on to the research question and hypothesis.
From that problem, the researchers developed a clear research question, and their central research question was, can expert radiologists miss a highly visible but unexpected object while performing a familiar medical search task? More specifically, they wanted to know whether radiologists searching chest CT scans for lung nodules would notice an unexpected gorilla inserted into the images. So,
Now, let's look at the design of the study.
So, this was an experimental study, and what that means by experimental study, so that means the researcher or researchers created a controlled situation, manipulated a variable, and measured the participants' responses. So now, the study included multiple experiments, but the central and the most famous part involved expert radiologists searching chest CT scans for lung nodules while an unexpected gorilla was inserted into one of these scans. And the design allowed the researchers to compare what participants were asked to do with what they actually noticed.
Yeah, so now let's move on to the participants.
Okay. The main participants of the study were 24 radiologists. These were trained medical experts whose professional job involved reading medical images and detecting abnormalities such as lung nodules. The article also included a comparison experiment using naive observers, but the most important part for this presentation is the group of expert radiologists.
And now, methodology and procedure.
The radiologists were asked to examine chest CT scans and search for small lung nodules. In this study, the radiologists scrolled through stacks of CT images just as they would in real clinical practice. And in the final trial, the researchers inserted a gorilla into the CT image sequence. Jeez. It was not tiny. In fact, the article states that it was much larger than the average lung nodule that radiologists were searching for.
And what was the result of the study?
The study found that 20 out of 24 radiologists, which is approximately 83%, did not report seeing the gorilla. Can you believe it?
No!
And that alone is remarkable. But the eye tracking data made the results even more powerful. Many of the radiologists who failed to report the gorilla had actually looked directly at its location.
Well, conclusion of the researchers.
Based on these findings, the researchers concluded that inattentional blindness persists even in experts performing within their own domain of expertise. In other words, expertise improves performance, but it does not eliminate the basic limits of selective attention. So this is very important conclusion.
Now, let's evaluate the limitations, guys.
The first obvious limitation is that the gorilla is an artificial stimulus. Real clinical abnormalities are not literal gorillas, so the study does not perfectly replicate the exact appearance of real diagnostic errors. And a second limitation is the sample size. Although recruiting expert radiologists is difficult, a sample of 24 is still relatively small. Yeah, and this study makes an important contribution to new knowledge in psychology. It demonstrates that selective attention can restrict awareness even in highly skilled observers working within their own area of expertise. And one of the most powerful implications of this study is that human error is not always a sign of laziness or incompetence. So sometimes it reflects the structure of attention self, and that is much deeper and more useful insight. And my interpretation is that perception is not just about what reaches the eyes, it's about what attention allows into awareness. And so in the end, we do not simply see the world as it is, we see the parts of it that our minds are prepared to process. And if you would like to discuss the study further or read it in full, feel free to contact me using the email shown below, and I'm more than happy to help. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much.